Hello, God bless. Today I will be refuting the claims that the 12 chapters of St. Cyril of Alexandria is the same as the Tome of Pope St. Leo. Now, what I mean by this, I do not mean that they are different in Christology. They are 100% in harmony in Christology. But what I am going to be referring to is how the way that they were issued as authoritative. Because critics of the papacy, they often like to cite that St. Cyril of Alexandria, his 12 chapters is the exact same of Pope St. Leo's tome. So they say that therefore the Tome of Leo cannot be infallible, nor can it be like any type of ex cathedra. But in this video, I will demonstrate that this simply is not the case, because St. Cyril's 12 chapters had permission and full authority of the Bishop of Rome, whilst the tome of Pope St. Leo, on the other hand, as he states that it was laid down by God and it contained the fullness of the faith, and that it was via Peter's ministry that he was able to do this. So the tome in St. Cyril's 12 chapters is very much different. So without further ado, let's get into the video. St. Cyril of Alexandria is asking for the judgment of the Bishop of Rome on Nestorius, because St. Cyril is very much confused on should he keep communion with him or should he not. So he's asking for the judgment of the Bishop of Rome, and in this letter he says, "It would be more agreeable if we keep silence, but God demands us vigilance, and ancient church customs requires me to inform your holiness. I was unwilling openly to sever communion with him until I had laid these facts before you. Deign therefore to decide what seems right, or tell him plainly that no one communicates with the person who holds and teaches what he does. Further, the purpose of your holiness ought to be made known by letter the most religious and God-loving bishops of Macedonia, and to all the bishops of the East, for we shall then give them, according to their desire, the opportunity of standing together in unity in soul and mind, and lead them to contend earnestly the Orthodox faith which is being attacked." So, like, notice how the way that St. Cyril is just asking for the judgment of the Bishop of Rome, whether to be in communion with him or not, because Nestorius is doing unorthodox teachings. He's saying like very heretical stuff. So St. Cyril of Alexandria, he's saying, yo, Celestine, my guy, hey, I'm gonna need some confirmation in this, because I think what he is saying is very much heretical, but I need your judgment in this matter, because I need to know what he is saying is actually heretical. So notice how the way he's asking for the judgment of the Bishop of Rome and not just acting out of his own authority here. St. Celestine, in his reply back, says something very, very noteworthy. St. Celestine gives Cyril the go card and lets him know that, yo, bro, you're right. Nestorius is actually low-key kind of heretical, so I'm just going to give you the go card, go pronounce the judgment of our Apostolic See on him, and you can get the entire issue resolved. So this is very interesting, because in this letter, St. Celestine says, if he, Nestorius, persists, an open sentence must be passed on him. And so, appropriating yourself to the authority of our see and using our position, you shall, with result sovereignty, carry out the sentence, that either he shall within 10 days counted from the day of your notice condemn in writing this wicked assertion of his, or if he will not do this, he will know that this is in every way, removed from our body. We have written the same to our brothers and fellow bishops, John of Antioch, Rufinus of Thessalonica, Juvenal of Jerusalem, and Flavian of Philippi. So our Rome's judgment about him, or rather the divine sentence of our Christ, may be known. So Pope St. Celestine is siding with Cyril in his Orthodox Christology and saying that you are right, Nestorius is wrong, go pronounce your judgment on Nestorius. So now that we have the context on why St. Cyril of Alexandria was using so much authority in enforcing his 12 anathemas on the entire church, it was solely because he had the confirmation and judgment and authority of the Bishop of Rome to do so. St. Cyril of Alexandria very much understood this, and as well as the Council of Ephesus. You have another letter of St. Cyril of Alexandria, his third letter to Nestorius. I'm not reading all that. You can just see from more further context that St. Cyril is very much understood that it was the Roman see that is granting him this authority and judgment to do what he is doing. Even scholars like Luke Revington understood this as well. He related, St. Celestine, on being appealed to by St. Cyril, at once convoked a synod, and was customary with the bishops of Rome, and gave St. Cyril a full and pathetic answer. He authorized him to act for him juridically. So far, St. Cyril's actions towards Nestorius had been an office of charity, not an act of jurisdiction. And you can read below, which I'm not going to because I have to continue with the other slides, and I want this to be a very, very short video. Try to make it as short as I can. But you can read the rest. It's very clear that Pope St. Celestine is very much giving Cyril the judgment in authority to act in his own person. Philip the presbyter, the legate of Rome, said the following, For a long time ago, our most holy and blessed Pope Celestine, Bishop of the Apostolic See, through his letters to that and most pious man Cyril, Bishop of Alexandria, gave judgment concerning the present cause and affair, which letters have been shown to your holy assembly. So, literally, they are saying that Pope St. Celestine gave his judgment on Nestorius, and St. Cyril followed this judgment. So, St. Cyril enforcing the 12 anathemas is literally by the confirmation in authority by Pope St. Celestine. Now, note, I accidentally put 12 chapters instead of 12 anathemas. Anyways, so in conclusion, St. Cyril of Alexandria did not act out of his own name in enforcing the churches to agree with his 12 anathemas. Rather, he had full confirmation, permission, and authority by the Apostolic See to enforce his theology because the Pope approved his and disregarded Nestorius as heretical. This is a huge contrast to what Pope Leo and the bishops thought of his tome, because there's a huge difference between the 12 anathemas on why it was considered binding and infallible versus the tome on why it was considered binding and infallible. Saint Flavian of Constantinople asked the Bishop of Rome to define the faith of the church in matters in Christology. Saint Flavian related, I asked him to let your holiness know what these things, that you might judge what seem right to you, undertaken by all means to follow your ruling. But without listening to anything which I said, they broke up the synod and published the sentence of my degradation. I take refuge, therefore, with the defender of the religion and abhorrer of such factions. I beseech you not to be prejudiced against me, but to pronounce the sentence which shall seem right to you upon the faith. Now, the context of this is even more interesting. St. Flavian of Constantinople, after being condemned in the Council of 448 by Eutychius, he appealed to the Bishop of Rome to overturn the decision by saying to judge what might seem right to you. So St. Flavian of Constantinople is clearly asking the Bishop of Rome for a formal definition of faith in the Christology matter, in the Christological matter, my bad. So in conclusion, St. Flavian is asking for the Bishop of Rome for a formal definition of faith in the matter of Christology. This is a huge drastic difference in contrast to what they claim, the Eastern Orthodox or any type of anti-papal critics, to what they say about St. Cyril. It's very different. The whole situation is different. Even the Council of Chalcedon say it's like different too. Like the Council of Chalcedon, and this is the second session, this is what they say. This is the faith of the fathers. This is the faith of the apostles. We all believe thus. The Orthodox believe thus. Anathema to him who does not believe thus. Peter has spoken these things through Leo. The apostles taught thus. Leo taught piously and truly. Cyril taught thus. Leo and Cyril taught in like manner. Anathema to him who does not believe thus. This is the true faith. We believe thus. This is the faith of the fathers. So the Council of Chalcedon is literally saying that the Tome of Leo was laid down by the apostle Peter himself. A huge drastic difference in contrast to what St. Cyril wrote. So St. Cyril, the reason why his 12 anathemas was considered binding and infallible was because it was approved by the Pope in an ecumenical council. But this, in the Council of Chalcedon in the second session, it was saying that it was already considered binding because Peter had laid down this tome. This is a huge drastic difference from the 12 anathemas of St. Cyril. Now we go to Leo and what he has to think about the Bishop of Rome's judgment. He says, and I quote, and was endued with the holy firmness of the inviolable rock on which the church should be built and conquered the gates of hell in the laws of death, so that in loosening or binding the petitions of any whatsoever, only that should be ratified in heaven, which had been settled by the judgment of Peter. So, in Pope Leo's ecclesiology, the judgment of Peter is settled. No one can go against his judgment. This is what Pope Leo has to say about his tome in letter 32. He says, and I quote, I have addressed a letter suited to the needs of the case to our brother Flavian, from which you also, beloved, and the whole church may know about the ancient and unique faith, which this unlearned opponent has assailed, what we hold as handed down from God, and what we preach without alteration. Yet because we must not forget the duty of mercy, we have considered in consonant with our moderation as priests, that if the condemned presbyter corrects himself unreservedly, the sentence by which he is bound should be remitted. So Pope Leo is essentially saying here that the tome was literally laid down by God, and that the sentence of Flavian should be undone. Nowhere will you find St. Cyril of Alexandria talking about his 12 anathemas like this. Never will you see him talk about his 12 anathemas like this. St. Cyril of Alexandria never said that the 12 anathemas was laid down by God. No, he never said this. What he did say is that, I have the confirmation and authority of the Bishop of Rome to carry out the sentence. That's exactly what he said. Pope Leo in letter 93 says the same thing. He says, and I quote, with the greatest fullness and clearness in the letter which we sent Bishop Flavian of happy memory, it has been laid down what is the loyal and pure confession upon the mystery of the Lord Jesus Christ's incarnation. So Pope Leo, in the given context of letter 93, which I have given above, it clearly states that he thinks that the tome is very much laid down by God himself. In contrast to the 12 anathemas, nowhere will you find St. Cyril making these huge claims, because Pope St. Leo is making it very, very clear that his tome is infallible, it is laid down by God, and that it contains the fullness of the faith. Nowhere will you find St. Cyril of Alexandria hyping up his 12 anathemas like this. I'm sorry to tell you, it's just not the case. Now, we respond to the objection that, oh, well, the tome was judged and, therefore it's no longer infallible because Vatican I says that the definitions of the Roman Pontiff can't be judged. Well, for one, depending on how the way you mean judge, this is correct. But how the way that Pope St. Leo is using judged here, and I'm going to prove it in the same letter afterwards, it literally just means to examine the case. What Vatican I is talking about on judge, meaning it's not subject to revision. That's why in the same sentence of Vatican I, it literally says that the definitions of the Roman Pontiff are irreformable. So yes, you cannot judge it and reform it, but you can judge it and examine it. Vatican I is very open to this. And Leo in letter 32 literally says that he has preached the faith without any alteration. So the council and Pope Leo knew that they could not alter his tome or fix any mistakes within the tome because the tome already contained the fullness of the faith. So therefore, any changes or any alteration or any type of revision would just be unnecessary in this case. Leo related the following: who has made heaven and earth, who have suffered us to sustain no harm in the person of our brethren, but has corroborated by the irrevocable assent of the whole brotherhood what he already laid down through our ministry. Notice how the way that he literally says that God laid down the tome through his ministry. Nowhere will you find St. Cyril saying that with his 12 anathemas. And to continue, to show that what has been first formulated by the foremost see of Christendom, and then received by the judgment of the whole Christian world, had truly proceeded from himself, that in this, too, the members may be at one with the head. So, let's take a note at judgment. Pope Leo is taking judgment to be a simple examination for everyone to be on the same accord. Now, let's ask them this. If they could have not examined the tome, then how could they know that St. Leo did actually preach the true faith? Obviously, they have to examine the tome and understand what Leo is saying. No one can just oh, okay, the Pope spoke ex cathedra. Nothing. I don't need nothing. I don't even need to understand it. It's just sufficient enough by itself. No, they need to understand what he is saying. That's common sense. Anyone with common sense will know that. And to end this video, in the same letter, Pope Leo 120 says the following: moreover, the truth itself shines more brightly and is more bravely maintained when what the faith had already taught is afterward confirmed by further inquiry, and in still the good name of the priestly office gains much in lustre where the authority of the highest is preserved without it being thought that the liberty of the lower ranks has been at all infringed. Pope Leo is literally saying that he exercised supreme authority in his tome before the Council of Chalcedon. And he says, before the context of this letter and after letters, literally says that God laid down the tome. So how is it that Pope Leo is saying that he is exercising supreme authority? He spoke infallibly, and the whole church has to accept it. How is this not Vatican I? And you cannot say that, oh yeah, the 12 anathemas, so GG's, Catho bros. No, you can't say that because St. Cyril never said that. This in of itself is an issue for the Eastern Orthodox, because you have Pope Leo saying that he exercised supreme authority, he spoke infallibly, and you cannot change his tone. You cannot deny that Pope Leo is teaching papal supremacy and papal ex cathedra. You just can't deny this, because if you do, you're denying what he actually thought, and which is, an issue once again. So Pope Leo, at the end of the day, he taught Vatican I. There is no denying it. Now, this video was in response to the Eastern Orthodox apologist known as Bryce J. He recently posted a slideshow and has been debating on TikTok Live. And it has also caught my attention that these silly arguments that these Eastern Orthodox use, that they actually think that these are good arguments. But as we can see that this isn't the case, he obviously is lying, and I demonstrated the facts that contrast to what Cyril in the council thought versus what Pope Leo in the council thought. You see, it's very different. Like, the entire thing is different. The context is different. The whole situation is different. Even their grandmas are different. Like, okay, anyways. You get the point. The entire situation is different. You cannot equivocate the two and say that the 12 anathemas is the same thing as the Tome of Leo. So therefore, it's an entire refutation to papal infallibility. No more ex cathedra. Eastern Orthodoxy rules and Catholicism drools. It obviously is not the case. And without further ado, in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, God be with you. God bless.